Thank you very much, Saga, and also thank you, Paul, Vivian, and Mark, for your fantastic opening remarks, which has made my job significantly easier. You see, I've left my notes over there because you said much what I wanted to say. I mean, I want to say, first of all, thank you to all of you for joining us here today, and I really liked the little slide beforehand illustrating just where we're all coming from and from which parts of the economy we're coming from, the public sector, the private sector, indigenous communities, and academia. And bringing those networks together is really fundamentally what this initiative has always been about. When we go back to the start of this initiative 8 years ago, it's been a long journey to get to where we're getting to. Susan, you mentioned in the very beginning, let's try to imagine, imagine the smudging. And during that process of imagination, I was imagining 8 years ago and where we are today. And would I have imagined, for example, that 8 years ago, today, we'd have this event being held in this way with the critical nature of this event in quite the same way? I don't think I would have imagined it being quite as critical as it is today. I mean, I think you've all made it very clear in your opening remarks already that this is an extraordinarily timely event. And it's an extraordinarily timely, I think, confluence of two really critical parts of the OECD's work programme. Two parts that have become more important over the last 8 years than we could have imagined 8 years ago. And we've brought together Indigenous leaders, Indigenous communities to shape this conversation. So the stakeholder effect has been, I think, fundamental, even in thinking about the agenda you have before you today. That agenda has been shaped by that partnership, the partnership that you mentioned, Saga, as being one of the two pillars that we have that drives this event. The two pillars being the importance of that inclusion, the importance of making sure that we have a strong ecosystem of actors engaged in the conversation. And the second pillar, of course, making sure that we understand that everything that we do over the next couple of days is about future-proofing our economies. And when we think about the critical minerals, they are fundamental, as you've all said in the opening remarks, to that green transition. There will be no net zero without that green transition. We also say within my part of the OECD that there'll be no net zero without SMEs as well. And SMEs themselves are the important actors in upstream and downstream supply chains that use critical minerals. So effectively, we're bringing together a whole range of different actors in those ecosystems that allow us to drive forward that progress, critically, that process. We're seeing that happening everywhere now. It's not just, of course, within the OECD. We've seen a massive prioritisation of this activity, but we're making sure, of course, it reaches different fora. So within the G20, we're having a very active conversation to make sure that this is also, I think, front and centre of the discussion, cutting across all the G20 different working groups. Critical minerals is there. It's also something, as many of you would have seen, was announced only a little while ago by the UN Secretary General. He put together a task force that was all about critical minerals. We engaged in that. We brought the studies and our experiences over the last 8 years to the table to make sure that your voices, and hopefully the voices that we'll have coming out for the next 2 days, are also going to continue to shape that conversation. Now, we're extraordinarily privileged, of course, to be here in Sudbury, because Sudbury, I think, is one of those places that brings together an awful lot of what we want to see happening over the next couple of days. It's a place, a city, that has a very high share of Indigenous community and Indigenous leaders. It has, as Paul has mentioned, a really high concentration of mining companies. But it's also a place where we've seen fantastic things happening over the years. We've seen an environmental transition. You were telling me yesterday about I can't remember the number now, the tens of hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of trees that have been planted over the last few years. I mean, and those are things that we want to learn from. This will be the 5th conference, but also the 6th study that we've undertaken. And all of them, I think, add to each other in the process. The 6th conference will take place next year in Finland, and hopefully that's going to learn from an awful lot of the conversations that we have today. Again, reinforcing and cementing this notion of future-proofing and making sure that we have inclusion at the heart of that future-proofing process. Because one of the things that we've learned over the last few years, not just through the prism of mining and critical minerals, is that in order to have a future-proof, resilient process, we need to understand the impacts that it has across society, the inequalities different pathways may generate, and inequalities themselves have costs, and the costs themselves undermine the progress and the resilience of any transition. So that's what I wanted to say. It's completely made up. The speech is over there. Perhaps I'll hand it out later on, but everybody else has said it a million times better than I could have. I really look forward to the conversation over the next couple of days, and I look forward to hearing the outcomes. as we go forward for the next conference. Thank you all.
Thank you to all our speakers for setting the context for this conference and for the next 2 days. It was really great to hear Nadim about the work that OECD is doing and that they're working in partnership with Indigenous communities across the globe. It's a very important context to set in terms of why do we have the participation that we have here today and the representation that we have here today. So I want to extend a huge miigwech to those that welcomed the participants here. Thank you very much. I now want to introduce the first panel of the day. Since 2016, the OECD Mining Regions and Cities Initiative has gathered best practices to improve well-being across regions specialized in mining activities. Let's hear now about some of the regions involved in this initiative and the key lessons and findings from 8 years of this initiative. As a reminder, you can use the Slido app to ask questions after the panel presentation, or you can raise your hand and someone will come around with a microphone and be able to pose the questions to the panel. I invite Andreas Sanabria, coordinator of the OECD Mining Regions and Cities Initiative, to the stage to kick off our first panel. Andreas, welcome.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I will invite the speakers. So please, Daniel Scott, Mayor of the City of Karata. We hosted last year conference in Karata, so please take the stage. Päivi Ekblad, Deputy Governor of Lapland. We're going to discuss a bit with you. And of course, our host today, Meredith Armstrong, Director of Economic Development of the City of Greater Sudbury. Yeah. Good. So, great. So we are going to start to go into the content, and now that we pass a bit the political remarks and the interesting introductions, before getting into the discussions with you, we would like to share a quick video about some images of the work that we have done during these years with different regions. That will give you some flavor of what we do, and probably we can take the discussion based on that. So please.
Minerals are essential for our societies and for meeting climate goals, but just as important are the people and ecosystems where mining takes place. Unlike other sectors, mining activities are geographically concentrated in specific regions, making the interaction with regional actors vital for mineral supplies and the development of hosting communities. Mining regions have diverse histories. Some have deep mining traditions. Others are exploring new projects and transitioning away from coal, and many have a rich indigenous history and culture. Mining can bring jobs, services, and infrastructure, but it can also lead to environmental degradation and social challenges. The high economic productivity of mining often fails to translate into a better quality of life for generations of local communities. Since 2017, the OECD Mining Regions and Cities Initiative has been a platform for sharing good practices and informed policy advice to address local negative externalities of mining and ensure it brings positive impacts to local communities and ecosystems. The initiative developed tailored regional studies in collaboration with local actors to identify a common vision for mining and regional development. These studies have guided subnational mining strategies with a place-based approach, local land use plans, and post-mining plans. The international conferences of the initiative have been hosted in mining regions across 4 continents, bringing together over 1,500 participants to exchange about common challenges and explore development opportunities in these regions. The initiative has also developed a data toolkit to measure well-being in mining regions relative to other OECD regions. It is an open tool for regions to track their progress across economic, social, and environmental dimensions. From this, we now know that OECD mining regions have an 18% higher GDP per capita and a greater share of youth than the OECD rural average, yet they produce 4 times higher greenhouse gas emissions and have less women in the workforce. National and subnational governments, alongside mining companies, can take the lead and play an active role in supporting participatory and bottom-up policies that ensure the green transition has a positive impact on local livelihoods. By connecting communities, local governments, the private sector, universities, and Indigenous peoples to share practical solutions and identify common goals, the OECD is working to build a more sustainable and prosperous future for mining communities. Better policies for better lives.
Thank you. Thank you. So as you see, someone yesterday asked me, this conference is about the industry, how many companies, how many providers. This conference is mainly about regions that happen to have mining and the well-being, how to improve the well-being of the people living in these regions. So I'm gonna share quickly with you just some of the practices that we have collected during these years, just 5 minutes, and that can give you an idea of what we want to share also in the case study in Northern Ontario. So these practices are not comprehensive, are just good ideas that we have seen in different regions. In terms of governance, we believe that starting with a good strategic planning that is centered on local priorities is the first genesis of a good mining development. And the second point that is important that we saw in Antofagasta is trying to develop plans, mining plans that can go after political cycles. So once the mayor, once the governor changes, priorities can change, but who can monitor the outcomes of these strategies? So multi-actor governance structures with communities and companies can help do that. And transparent and accessible information is another important aspect. This name and shaming approach, try to identify really what are the projects that are being responsible and try to communicate these to the market. Try to understand what is the cumulative effect on the environment. Because you have mining in many regions, you have also renewable energies, forestry. So the cumulative effect on the environment is difficult to understand. And we believe that is something that is more and more a need. On social outcomes, I'm not gonna just mention the first one, is approaching indigenous peoples and communities from a shareholder approach rather than a stakeholder approach. This is a main topic of this conference. Join public-private actions to improve the livelihood of mining regions, especially remote mining communities, childcare, healthcare. Sometimes these regions struggle to find workers to provide this type of services. And we have good examples, for example, on housing in Labrador in Canada. Managing fly-out workers, especially for remote mining regions. We are gonna hear from Karata. Sometimes you have regions that the fly-out workers are more than the local people living. That brings different culture, different approaches to understand and behave with the community. On environmental outcomes, addressing former environmental liabilities. We have seen in the case studies that we have done, some of the misconceptions of community towards mining comes from these tailings that they see from past operations, some bad behaviors that past operations left. So now there is a big role of different regions on how we address these environmental liabilities. We have Antofagasta, they put obligation to the new mining companies to take care of the obligations of all projects. That is an approach. Portugal with a company, a national company dedicated just to alleviate these tailings and well, the regreening project of Sudbury that is well known. Community-led environmental monitoring systems, that is very important, especially again in remote regions where the staff, government staff to monitor the impact of mining is limited. The government has a limited capacity to reach different places, so empowering community to do this monitoring, I think we have found a big success with this one. And circular economy is still a risky sector. Mining companies is not the core for them to go into the circular economic practices. Some brownfields already projects that were designed with a circular economy approach, they need to partner with universities, with entrepreneurs to try to mobilize this recycling or reusing of some tailings. I think that is very important, and we have a panel tomorrow on this. And finally, economic outcomes. We put them at the end in purpose because we think that economic is not the main factor of mining, as mining provides a lot of wealth, a lot of income, but the issue is how to distribute it well, how to leave a legacy in the region. So diversification programs, we saw one very interesting in Sweden, funded by the company, that is not just for mining providers, but also for other entrepreneurs. Improving the matching of skills. People study, and the offer of studies are different sometimes of what the industry needs. The industry goes sometimes faster than the academy. And so oftentimes they prefer to train the people inside, so how we can improve these partnerships. And innovation networks for added value, and I think Salisbury has a lot of things to teach on this. So with this I finish, and I want to give the floor to Daniel, please, and please tell us about Karata and what you have done there and your challenges, your opportunities there. Thank you.
Okay. Should be able to hear me. I've got quite a large, deep voice, so. Just want to first, I'd like to just pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional owners of here and where we're holding the conference today. And thank you for the welcome to country. It's very nice to be welcomed in, especially from a region like Karratha, where, you know, I'm proud to be standing here representing our community, and that includes our community, you know, Indigenous people, the Ngalama people from where I am. So yeah, the city of Karratha has a long history, and you know, the Ngalama people and the Indigenous people of our lands, some of the longest continuous cultures on the planet. So what we're doing there in this space is very, very, very important, and I'm glad to be in a room with people that sort of understand our region and what we face and the challenges. I think all of our challenges are very similar, and it's great to be with people that sort of acknowledge that. Now, I just want to excuse myself as well, but if I trip over myself or nod off later today, it's because I spent 30 hours in transit, just over 30 hours in transit to get here. And I woke up this morning at 3:45 and I could not get back to sleep. So I'm going to try my best to get through this, and I'm sure I'll wake up eventually. I remember seeing you there. Yeah, and I wasn't the mayor in Karratha last year when this conference was held there. I think the election was a week later. So you know, a week later from the last OECD conference, I became Karratha's first publicly elected mayor. So we've given the power back to the people, which it didn't occur before. All right, so I'll jump straight into my slide. Now, I do have some notes here. I'm not as organised as I'd like to be. Okay, Karratha. So, Karratha, as we like to say, I think Fiona has, like she said, is the centre of the universe. Now, we like to think that, and we're claiming that that Karratha is now the new city of the north. And my endeavour is to build a larger population base that has the underpinning economy to create Australia's next future city of Australia, because we have the economic powerhouse to do it. But the history of what's happened in the past through government decision has led to a large fly-in, fly-out workforce. So I'll share with you, we have 8,500 people a day that fly into the Pilbara. And there's a larger FIFO population in the Pilbara region than there is a residential population. So 60,000 people in the Pilbara, but 8,500 people from across the country fly into the Pilbara every day. Karratha has the second busiest regional airport in the nation, and we receive 1,400 people a day, every day of the year, flying into our community for work, which represents, you know, challenges. So we're a population of just over 24,000 people. We have around 15,000 jobs in our local region. One of the important things we've been doing is a lot of economic studies because what we're finding, our fight with federal and state governments is really about the fact that we're a long way away, and when you get a low voter base, it's very hard to be heard. So we have to go and do economic studies to gather the evidence-based data, that's irrefutable. So then what's left is just political will. So when we're going to talk to government, we're saying, no, this is irrefutable data, this is evidence-based, and this is what we need. And then the next hurdle from there is obviously the political hurdle, which is a large hurdle to get over, but is one that we're on a journey with now. So we have a large output of wealth. Just the city of Karratha alone generates $20 billion of economic output. And that contribution per person, that high productivity, sort of scales to each person that operates an industrial worker in our region generates $375 per hour to the GDP, as opposed to the national average of $56 per hour. So that's how important our region is to the national economy of Australia. And we have a very low unemployment base because of the cost of living. If you don't have a job in our region, you don't live there. So our employment base is 1.8%. So basically everyone is fully employed. So what's happened over the future? A lot of you in the room have been in Karratha last year. Been a year. It's amazing what changes and what we're up to. So 25% of our mining royalties were invested into our community over the last 10 years, and that was through the previous government. Now, I don't want to have a pot shot at our governments, but through the previous administration in Australia, they created a royalties for region program, which generated, so 25% of that wealth was put back into the regions of Western Australia. And that's what a lot of you witnessed last year in Karratha, was a decade's worth of reinvestment after 40 years of no investment that created the city that's there today. And when you go to Karratha, you see a new city. All the buildings are brand new. It's new, clean, but it's a tale of two cities as well. We've got a lot of wealth that's generated in our community, and you've got people that are on high disposable incomes that get housing provided to them for free or heavily subsidised. So you have this wealth that's there, and we have the same vehicles. All of a sudden, over that 10-year period, what happened as well is you go to Karratha, you see Rams, GMCs, Chevrolets. You swear it's a mini Canada or US. There's these the big pickup trucks and four-wheel drives everywhere. So what we're trying to do is, obviously, that royalties region program is very important to us. So we're trying to get sort of something like that back. We want our federal government to reinvest back into us, because we truly believe that if we're empowered as a local government, we're a lot more connected to our community, and we can solve a lot of our problems locally. But our problem is our constitution. As I was talking before to your local member here, our constitution doesn't allow us to directly fund local governments, but I'm sure that if a government did, I don't think anyone's going to take them to the High Court to refute it. So we've seen from last year, we created our recreation hub. We've got our new hospital. We've got the airport that we're trying to get international. When I took 5 flights and 30 hours in transit to get here, one of the biggest pushes we're doing is we need an international airport at Karratha, because we're an hour and 30 minutes from Denpasar. We're 3 hours from Singapore. All we need to do is open up our international connectivity, and that'll open us up to the world and give us further opportunity. So where to next for Karratha? Oh no, that's my last slide, is it? Oh, that's a shame. I've got a lot more to say. But so yeah, this is where the fatigue is starting to set in. But Karratha's on a big journey at the moment. So what we've done now is we've got under new leadership, under myself as the new mayor and new executive staff, we're taking on a journey where we've done a strategic community plan over the last year that's included the whole community. It's included our Indigenous community as well. We've had the largest participation in a community survey ever conducted in the history of our region. It's given us great insight into what the needs are of our community. And that's going to roll into a community infrastructure plan. So we've got the next decade of growth. Now, with the mining and resources sector being so heavy in our area, and over 50% of all projects in the future are renewable or green energy, there's a lot of things as a local government we can't control. But what we can control is the outcomes for our community. So our focus as the City of Karratha is to make sure that we're advocating on our people's behalf to make sure that we get the best outcomes for our community, because unfortunately there's little we can do in this space when you've got the biggest companies in the world operating our area and the money that's involved and the political will that we can't really control. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. And I'll try to stay awake, and I'm happy to speak to anyone later on today. I might excuse myself for a quick power nap later, but I'll be available for questions. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Daniel. We're gonna go to questions later, but let's give the floor now to Meredith, please. Meredith, you can.
He just told me I have control.
Yeah,
So,
please go.
thank you. Thank you very much. What a pleasure to follow. I had the pleasure of traveling myself and Dawn too to Karratha last year, so I feel you. It's a long way away. So many parallels echo for me when I hear your presentation. And Mayor Lefebvre did a wonderful job of introducing this morning, so I won't spend too much time on this slide, but what I think is important for our international guests to understand is that Greater Sudbury is the base camp. We are not separate from where the mines are. The mines are within city limits. So we're the most beautiful base camp in the world, we like to say. And we have developed from, about 140 or so years of mining to a very large geographic area, 3,200 square kilometers, 2/3 the size of Prince Edward Island here in Canada. And our population is actually growing quite well for Northern Ontario. We're approaching 180,000 actually most recently. And there are thousands of kilometers of tunnels under your feet right here where we are today. So I think that's really important, because when you zoom out, and I think that's one of the most important things for us, the experience of being part of the OECD Mining Regions initiative, is that we have the ability to zoom out and understand experiences elsewhere in the world. And the fly-in, fly-out is a different experience than we have here. We've worked very hard over many years to attract and retain that talent in our community. Mentioned the number of mines, processing plants. About 14,000 people work in mining supply and service, where there's about 5,000 or so in the mines themselves. So that's a really important thing for us too. The diversification, the expertise has developed into this mining supply and service hub, which is important as well. And of course, you can't move the resources. Class 1 nickel, some of the highest grade nickel in the world, as well as copper, platinum, palladium, and a number of other minerals are mined here. A number of you will be able to take the tour on Friday, which celebrates our regreening process. I can tell you the number is actually closer to 14 million trees now that we've planted. When you add everything together, we actually had Dr. Jane Goodall here, I guess 2 summers ago, to celebrate the ceremonial planting of the 10 millionth tree. But when you add all of the different groups, we like to say if you've lived in Sudbury for any amount of time, you've probably planted a tree, you've probably released a trout into our river systems, and that really produces a sense of ownership, a sense of home for Sudburyans when it comes to our environment. We're one of those special places in the world where generations have left it better than they found it for future generations. We're not done, we can't rest on our laurels, but we certainly have learned a lot from that process. The other thing about rural development and mining regions within the context of the OECD is, as a municipality, and I think we're going to get into this, what is our role in preparing the ground for this? And when it comes to that support for entrepreneurs, We've seen a mining industry that over many decades has gone through automation, has gone through new technologies, labor unrest. These conditions have created situations where you have people who have worked in the mine and who are finding themselves in transition. And I think that's part of the reason you see that we have 350 or so mining supply and service companies. A lot of these companies have their roots in people who were working in the mines previously, who found themselves changing careers or out of work and actually took it upon themselves to create new businesses. The role of the municipality has been to use our capacity, our resources to support those entrepreneurs. So we have programs like the Northern Ontario Exports Program, and we have a few folks in the room here who've been involved in that. And over about 12 or so years, that program has basically been like a life coach for a small business. In the very earliest stages of that program, we were helping small businesses who had one contract to Inco, which was the largest company at the time. We helped them understand that they needed to diversify their client base. They needed to get things like websites and toll-free numbers. It was really basic stuff at the beginning. Over time, we now see that those companies have gone on to export all over the world, bringing in talent from all over the world and really increase the resiliency of our economy. And in fact, over COVID, Sudbury continued to have some of the lowest unemployment in Canada, partly because our businesses were servicing the global mining world. The other one is our Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program participation. This is a federal program through Immigration Canada. And over the past several years, that has allowed rural communities like Sudbury all over Canada, there's 11 communities that participated in the pilot, attract newcomers with a pathway to permanent residency. And through that program, we actually have secured about 2,700 or so newcomers here in Sudbury, when you include spouses and family members. And again, with low unemployment, that's been crucial to attracting our talent and retaining them in the community. The last one here on this slide I would mention is other opportunities for the municipality to play a role include things like our biosolids management facility. This is a leading practice where the city has partnerships with private sector, and the biosolids plant takes exactly what you think it is and creates soil additives that are used by the mining companies in greening rehabilitation, including rehabilitation of slag and that kind of thing. If you do get a chance to visit the Big Nickel, I know a few have, you'll notice that there are lovely green hills in the background on valet property. Those are slag piles that have been rehabilitated using things like this technology. So interesting elements there. Oops. I think we'll also need to mention, we had a really wonderful day of conversations yesterday on Indigenous partnerships. And it's been my privilege to be part of a conversation that has been growing with Tigamikshing, Anishinaabeg, and Wanapitei First Nation, together with the city. The leadership in all three communities has given us a new opportunity for collaboration. We're also very proud to watch the developing opportunities between the two First Nations and Technica Mining, and I believe we have Mario in the room this morning as well. These champions have taken the opportunity to grow a partnership that is perfectly placed to advance initiatives in the mining sector, and really is the demonstration of what meaningful engagement can look like. It's not just ticking a box. We know this is not just conversations with stakeholders. It's about really good jobs. It's about masterful techniques when it comes to ESG, environmental awareness. And this company, Aki Dibe, I practiced it so many times this morning. Aki Diben Uwenzumin is the company with the three parties. What is our role as the city? Well, we have networks, we have capacity, we have lots of platforms where we can start to connect the dots for ADLP and our communities and help lead the way. And we know more and more that we're getting interest from other companies, other parts of the world in how this can be done and what the role of the local government is. So I'll leave it there and I'll pass it on. Thanks, Andres.
A region that is, you have probably 90% of the exploration of mining of Finland. You are one of the hopes for Europe to become self-sufficient in mining, but you have 30% of natural reserves and pushing for that. So how you deal with that, please?
Thank you. Yes. It doesn't show here. No, now it is. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. I've come here from the northernmost region of the European Union, from Finnish Lapland, and want to bring you at the same time warm greetings from Santa Claus, because he lives in in my city, actually 2 kilometers from my home. So I was thinking about him when we were talking about the distances and your 30 hours of transit, because he manages the whole world in one day. But of course, he then gets rest for the rest of the year, so it's maybe easy for him. But I represent the Regional Council of Lapland, that is owned by the municipalities of Lapland. We have 21 municipalities. So our tasks in Regional Council are related to regional development, regional land use planning, and safeguarding the interests of our municipalities. Lapland is geographically a big area in relation to whole Finnish landscape. We have 30% of the land area of Finland, but what comes to inhabitants, it's only 3% of the inhabitants. So we have 1.8 persons per square kilometer. It can be compared to our capital city, capital region, Helsinki, that has the same figures, but vice versa. They have 3% of the land area and 30% of the inhabitants. So we are a very sparsely populated area. But what comes to our other assets, we have the world's cleanest air in Lapland. Our industries, the largest sectors are metal industry and forest bioeconomy, retail and tourism, and mining and extraction is on the 5th position at the moment. We produce 7% of the export of Finland, so that is quite good when you think about the amount of inhabitants in Lapland. And to this 7%, tourism is not counted. And if it would be counted, it would make maybe 4% more to this figure. So what comes to mining industry in Lapland, Lapland is the hub of Finland's mining industry and extraction activities. As was already mentioned, nearly 80% of all mineral exploration permits in Finland were concentrated in Lapland in 2023. There are several investments that are underway and planned in the mining industry, and there are a lot of major players in the mining sector that have showed their interest to our region. Many of our mineral deposits are located near mountain areas and tourism regions. That of course raises concerns on the land use and environmental impacts. And what I didn't mention yet when describing Lapland as a region, of course, what is the most important and has very big impacts, of course, is that we are also a region of indigenous people. So what we, of course, appreciate a lot, we have the Sami indigenous people in the northernmost part of Lapland, and the area that is a restricted area for business operations that covers maybe like 1/3 of the land area of Lapland. When we think about the challenges and opportunities of the mining sector in Lapland, as I mentioned already, the environmental impacts is of course one of the major challenges. We have an Arctic nature which is very vulnerable, and it has to be taken into notice in all actions. Concerns raised, they include, for example, water management and possible decline in biodiversity. Tourism is very important to Lapland. It is the amount of tourism in income and as an industry is raising about 20% per year. So after pandemic, we have already reached the level of tourists in Lapland and already exceeded that. And this year is now going to be again one of the biggest years in relation to tourism. So of course that is one concern. There is a lot of talk about how to combine, for example, tourism and mining businesses. There are good examples that has succeeded, but of course it is not a similar situation all around Lapland, because there are different areas and some regions are more touristic regions than others. Social acceptance is of course one of the major issues that is related to tourism, but it is related to indigenous people and it is related to the inhabitants in Lapland. And worrying signs we are seeing at the moment in Rovaniemi, for example, which is the capital city of Lapland, concerning tourism and the growth, that if it is positive or negative issue. So in relation to that, of course, mining and the environment is another thing. The infrastructure issues, from that I would like to raise maybe the biggest issues, challenges, the housing and transportation. Those mining deposits, the municipalities owning the mining deposits, they are located in distant areas where there is no housing possibilities. So that is one major problem, because that creates the fly-in and fly-out workers when they don't get modern apartments and houses from the region. But then going to the opportunities, of course, economic growth is a big one, because mining brings substantial economic benefits to Lapland. The tax revenues that are related to that are huge. We try to also to answer to the global demand for minerals, because we are located in an area where the rare minerals are existing. And now at the moment we are developing a specific ecosystem model that we call Lapland Mining Hub, that we try to use as a solution, or it creates solutions for this different kind of discussions and development activities. We are now under this this is TSI project financed by DG Reform and implemented by OECD. That is in a good way ongoing at the moment. And it has supported the collaboration between the European mining regions, and it helps us to identify important issues related to our development at various levels. We have had several discussions with OECD and between the regions, and we can say that it has made us already now stronger, and it is helping us to create our partnerships in a very prominent way. the results of our TSI project. They will be now developed and they will be ready by next summer when we will have this OECD conference in Rovaniemi. So I'm sure that you will then get to know the region and also the results and the challenges and possibilities raised from the TSI better. So at the same time, I want to invite you to Rovaniemi next summer, and let's see then. We have good flight connections. And that is a benefit that we get from the tourism business, because it is not always even recognized in Finnish national level that actually Rovaniemi is the second busiest and second international airport in Finland after Helsinki, after our capital city. So I'm sure that you will find a perfect flight when you come. Thank you.
Thank you, Päivi. I think now we have 10 minutes for discussion. I remind you that you can use the Slido app if you have any question, or you can just raise your hand if you have any question for this amazing panelist. I just have a question for the three of you, and it's about the role of regional governments or subnational governments. So mining, we know, is a global sector. Most cases, the national government is the one really leading the attraction of investment, and in some cases, the mapping of the resources. You mentioned, Meredith, that as a local government, you can be the bridge to try to connect mining with companies. What other tools you have in your domain to improve this connection between mining and development? You can talk about land use, probably, Daniel. I think also is interesting, and I'll let you put your ideas.
Yes? Okay. So it's interesting if you look at it in Australia, the political structure, the federal government, the national government, they'll approve multi-billion-dollar projects, right, with the flick of a pen that jumps through all the hurdles of the environmental, concerns they need. So they get approved. But one thing they don't take into consideration a lot is the community of impact that it puts on a community. So for the Pilbara region, for example, now this is a new number. I'm happy to say it because I'm in Canada and I'm not in Australia. But the Pilbara has $250 billion of pipeline investment for the critical mineral sector. We're going to maintain our iron ore, we'll maintain our LNG for the time being as we transition. And 50% of that $250 billion is in renewable energies. Now, all these projects are getting signed off, but I haven't had a federal minister come and knock on my door and say, Daniel, how are we going to build the houses for these 60,000 people that we need to facilitate this construction work? So what we've been doing as a city is, with the state government, is doing a community impact study. Right, if these projects come off, what's the impact to our community? So what we've found out is that with Karratha, we know that we've got $35 billion of investment that is committed. So that these projects are at final investment decision. It's happening. It's not a pipeline of investment. It's $35 billion worth of work happening in Karratha that needs 10,000 people. And from that data, we now know we need 1,200 houses extra. We're 4,000 accommodation beds short to facilitate this construction work. So the important work that we're doing as a local government, and what local governments or municipalities can do, is be that link to federal government, because they're not thinking necessarily of the community that these projects are going to impact on. So it's up to us as a local government to make sure that we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure that we're heard in this space. That's what we're doing in the city of Karratha, and I presume that I'm hoping that if you're not doing it in your areas, come and talk to me. I can talk to you about all that community impact study and all the economic data and the evidence-based research we're doing to make sure that we can get the outcomes for our community.
Yeah, great. The community impact studies. Meredith, you already said it, but if you want to add something.
How about now? Okay. So, I mean, I think everything that you've said makes sense. Housing is a key. Workforce, we have similar issues. We'd love to have 35 billion in terms of pipeline. We do work really hard to make sure that it's understood that the land, the talent, and the resources are available here. And I think it's also worth noting that when we're talking to developers or companies of all shapes and sizes, their questions sometimes surprise people, right? Of course, they want to know about site selection and land. They want to know about local government, right? Is it a progressive local government that's supportive of business? Because we're the ones giving them the permits. We're the ones of the last mile when you turn off the highway. And then they want to know about, quality of life and family doctors. And so there's, I think it's a really holistic role of a local government that is exactly that, the important voice to the higher levels of government to remind them that it's about the whole picture when you're talking about such massive investments.
If anyone has a question, I think we can have 5 minutes, but Fabi, if you want to say something. Okay, but you can answer.
Yeah, I can say in the meanwhile we are reading the questions. In Lapland or in Finland, we face serious issues between our national government and the region because we really don't. We think in the region that the national government doesn't really appreciate and understand the situation. Actually, what we have in Lapland, that we have the possibilities concerning mining also and the mining projects. So we don't feel so many supporting speeches or activities from our national government to ease the situation. For example, the housing, the municipalities are responsible, so the national government is not making any specific activities that would make it easier in Lapland but they concentrate their activities to the capital city and to the capital area. So we have to defend our rights in a way all the time. So maybe that's something.
Very good questions. I think the second one is very difficult, but very good to ask you. At your level, what you can do to achieve the net zero economies or to help this industry advance in the green transition? Probably, Paivi, you have one. When you answer, you have one for you, but please.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we've got that pipeline of investment. 50% of our new projects are renewable. But as I think it was the mayor here locally said that the SMEs, or was it yourself? The SMEs are really important. So what we've recognised as well is that there's this want to go to net zero, but in the Pilbara region, we generate 14% of Australia's emissions. So we're a major contributor to the emissions for our country. So there's pipeline investment coming. But what's not being thought about is those small to medium enterprises are going to also need to get to net zero. And if we don't get the global network of people thinking about how we're going to get to net zero, including the Pilbara getting there, because our client base of our exports of our critical minerals, our gas, that 14% emissions, is going to countries that are also trying to get to net zero, but have an insatiable thirst still for our iron, our LNG, our oil. So as a economy, how do we slow down that investment pipeline when we've got other global countries that we have to assist in order for them to get there as well? So from a global context, the Pilbara is absolutely critical. If the whole world wants to get to net zero by 2050, it can't be done without our region that generates majority of the the critical minerals and the iron that goes globally.
You want to reply?
Sure, I think that for us, achieving net zero economies needs Sudbury too. We talk a lot about how Sudbury plays a key role in the transition globally to green economies and green technology. So our community, at the community level, we have a community energy and emissions plan looking at, even residents and businesses as well as major pieces, are mining companies. There are hundreds of battery electric vehicles underground right now, using the nickel and the minerals that come from the ground. And I think the expertise we have in Sudbury is actually leading the way in how to mine in a green and a lower emissions way as well. So I think we see it as part of that circular economy that you were talking about, in terms of what we have under the ground, but the expertise at the industrial level, but also at the community level, really being aware of every step that we can take. It's going to be a long haul, but I think it's part of what makes us Sudbury, really.
For you, the last one, Meredith. A few major, this was a question that a few major companies hold. It's up now. Mining land is the first one. Yeah, that is. A few major mining companies control most mining land packages. Are you working to urge these big players to unlock the potential?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I think we have good relationships, good conversations. We have a few folks here in the room who are part of those conversations, whether it's looking at industrial land opportunities. Sometimes, it's about the technology. We have some incredible research going on with tailings and value from tailings. There's all kinds of levels of potential. Yes, the mining companies are the largest landowners in Sudbury, but we are also a very big city, so we're finding ways of working at various levels for that. So.
Okay. And to finalize, you have.
I was thinking about that. That is now the second question from the up. So about these approval systems, I don't know if there is so much to learn from Finland, because for us also it is very complicated and very time consuming. And maybe related to that, 30% of the land in Lapland is protected area. So we were already thinking that we are in a good position when the European Union is increasing the requirements for the amount of restricted areas in countries. So in Lapland we have reached that goal already. But on a national level, I think in Finland it is in around 10 to 15%. And now we have heard from the national discussions that they don't want to protect the land in southern Finland, because they need to use that for economic activities. So they want to push that requirement to Lapland. So finally, Lapland would be the region ensuring that Finland reaches the goals of the European Union in protected areas. So, but it means that from our area, it would mean at least 50% of protected areas, and in that we should do all the economic activities also. So that is, of course, something that concerns us, and it doesn't make the approval or permitting processes any faster, because then I think all of the mining areas would be on protected areas, and that's very difficult, as everyone knows. So that's something that we tackle at the moment.
Perfect, thank you. So we are going to finish the panel. Thank you for the contributions, and thank you for
Thank you, Andreas, and to our panel members, Daniel Scott, Meredith Armstrong, and Pavi Ekdahl, for your insightful contributions and an overview of the respective cities and territories that you are bringing to this conference today. I want to invite you to a short coffee break of 15 minutes, which has kindly been provided by Laurentian University. We will reconvene at 10:35 to welcome Minister Wilkinson to the stage. Please have a great coffee break.